Yo, let's talk today about Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. First, I'll give my spoiler-free breakdown and review, and then we can jump into the more spoilery territory. This book follows 4 women into the mysterious Area X in Florida. We're never really informed about what's going on here in its entirety. Is it aliens? Is it some kind of biological infestation? The Lovecraftian horror of the unknown here is really strong because of how little we know about the encroaching dangers. Each of these women do not go by their name, they go by their specialty in Area X: the biologist, the anthropologist, the surveyor, the psychologist. This story is from the perspective of the biologist, but it seems to be more of a post-report, first-person epistolary story. She's written it with the benefit of looking back, so it does have a bit of a different feel when reading it than a first-person flashback story or the more cinematic first-person style found in YA, where they're kind of narrating what they're doing in the moment from their point of view. This epistolary format does a lot to add to the mystery and to raise questions of the trustworthiness of this narrator, though. While I thought that the story would be fairly short based on the word and page count, this book reads way slower than I thought it would. Vandermeer uses a lot of long, descriptive sentences to draw out the horror of this place, and I think it's done really well, but it definitely is a surprise when I read for a bunch of time and I don't really get that far. But these sentences can really envelop you in this world compared to sentences that are more short and terse. Well, I think that most people will call it Lovecraftian, and it does have those color out of space vibes for sure. It's certainly pulling more inspiration from Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers, or Who Goes There by John Campbell, which is what The Thing was based off of. It's probably more in the vein of William Hope Hodgson than H.P. Lovecraft, seemingly taking massive amounts of inspiration from stories like The Voice in the Night with this fungal infestation and the first-person accounts from The Boats of Glencarrig. There's some body horror, there's some spooky nihilism, some what's really going on here exploration of the consciousness and experience, and it's also a character piece, looking at our point of view here from the biologist. She's a very introverted female character who's not passive or weak on one side of trope, but doesn't have a lot of empathy for others, but she's not some kind of gun-toting badass on the other side of that trope scale. She fits perfectly in the middle of this actual deep character. I think I enjoyed navigating her character a lot in this story. In this way, I think it does a lot of good touching on both sides of the horror that I really enjoy. The unknown environment horror, that things are just kind of happening, we're not really going to get an explanation for why, but nature or some form of impact is just causing these things to happen. And the exploration of character problems that kind of mirror the horror that they're going to experience. Normally you can see this happening in more haunted house or ghost stories, but the fact that it happens here is really interesting and well done. Awesome book, probably one of my favorites I've read this year. I'll give it like a bundle of mushrooms out of 5. Now, for the spoilers. We're going to talk about some specific stuff, so spoiler alert, return to your perfect world, untainted by these words, if you wish to avoid knowing the unknown. I think the level of untrustworthiness of the narrator is very well done on a few different levels here. The character is initially affected by the psychologist's hypnotic triggers, meaning that anything all the way up until she inhales those mushy spores, we can't know for certain that's exactly how it is. That's just her perception of what's going on. We don't know about the entrance into Area X. Even the training time that she spends before going into this area is tainted by these hypnotic triggers. Well, not outright said, it's very implied that these triggers have affected her perception in those times. And on top of all this external effect on her perception, she chooses not to tell us things sometimes. Like when she talks about the glowing that happens going to and from the lighthouse, she chooses to tell us that way later. It showcases that she's focusing on very specific things that she can explain and avoiding other things that she doesn't want to look into the eyes because she can't understand it. I think this is similar to her analysis of one of the journals that she reads in the lighthouse that only talks about the thistles that it finds, ignoring the looming monster just beyond the thistles. I think you could definitely make an argument that the insights that she gives on the Thistle journal are straight up projections of her own fears and avoidance of telling us certain details of the unexplainable, if not to hide some of her level of insanity, or if only because she can't unpack what she doesn't know, and so she needs to focus on what she can explain to hold on to some of her sanity. I think I felt a bit of a hiccup in the pacing at points, especially when we get some of those flashbacks to when she's interacting with her husband. I don't think these pacing issues are all too crazy. I just wanted a bit more exploration into Area X. That is the big mystery here, but these husband problems do end up circling back to us, and so I can appreciate them if I didn't really want to read them in the moment. Having read them, I feel way better about them. Having said that I didn't really like reading these characterization moments for the biologist, I did really like the overall characterization of the biologist as a whole. Being that person so caught up in their work, feeling like they are almost ruling over all of it to the point of self-destruction. I think that mirrors well with feeling as a human, you are ruling over nature, you have full understanding of everything going on, all the way up until the point you get killed because of your hubris. The strain between her and her husband pulled a lot of emotion out of me. I saw her perspective of everything, but I hurt for the husband who's just trying his best, especially when she chooses to reveal some of the portions portions of his journal to us. My biggest complaint for this whole story is probably the final entrance into the tower and the encounter with the crawler, along with that encounter with the door at the bottom of the tower. Perhaps I'm not understanding this properly, but it certainly feels like one last thing gets tossed up into the air as an unknown, but it feels like a morsel that we need to have explained, whereas a lot of the other mysteries of Area X do not need to be. I don't want answers for everything, but it feels like the author's intention of this door is probably to set up books 2 or 3, and the rest of this story feels so standalone that it kind of irked me a bit, where I'm like, no, I want to be able to just read this book and not need to have anything else and feel content. I'm going to read the other books, but something about that mystery being left up in the air bothered me in some ways. Obviously, there are the greater mysteries of the Southern Reach as a whole and Area X, but those don't feel like they need to be answered, whereas this feels like it does. And so while all 3 of these things might get answered later in other books, only one of them feels like it needs to be, and it kind of is upsetting. The actual ending, however, I loved. Her walking up the coast and this being the last little bit that she writes before she abandons this journal in the lighthouse. I think it perfectly showcases this stable insanity that Area X seems to inflict upon people. One of my favorite scenes, though, happens really early on when the boar attack happens and they describe it. They talk about the weirdness of this experience of an emergency situation that's taking so long to develop. It plays with that tension and that threat, doom that is so far away but inevitable. I think these are good comments on the idea that Area X won't kill you like falling into a black hole in space or an explosion, but it's doom that will come just the same, if not more horrifying because of the delayed onset. This is a piece that focuses on philosophy and lingers on the mind and the ideas of perception and experiencing things versus just reading about experiencing things, and it leaves something with you when you're done. Honestly, this left way more fear in me of plants than anything that M. Night Shyamalan could have done with that happening. The plants are killing people? Oh no. I would definitely recommend this book to people who just want to get a little bit spooky in their life, want to get a little bit horror without a monster in their life. But there we go, my quick review and analysis of Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. If you liked what I had to say, please hit that like button. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time, and until then, stay lit.